Hello and welcome back to the Biostasis Technologies podcast. Our guest today is Chuck Bartels, and this one actually fits in quite well with our very recent post on the Cryo Registry. We're very interested in developing local SSD capabilities, standby stabilization, and transport capabilities, and Chuck will certainly know quite a bit about that. So I'm going to ask Chuck to introduce himself. First of all, tell us a bit about yourself and your professional background.
All right. My two main professions that I've been involved in would be behavior analyst in the state of Minnesota in one of the counties there. For about 10 years, I did that. I developed behavior change programs for the developmentally disabled and trained staff, developed the programs and trained staff in their implementation. So that's in a nutshell what I did there. And then I moved over to advertising copywriting, which I did for about 10 years and with three different local agencies in the Twin Cities. And since then, I've just been kind of doing more creative things, just spending too much time on Cryonics.
You can't spend too much time on Cryonics, really. It's a pretty essential activity.
That's what I'm finding out.
And how did you first become involved in Cryonics? Where did you first hear of it? What were your first people you met, and how did you get involved?
I've always been not a fan of death since I was a child. I wrote a little article for CI some years ago. And in it, I mentioned that when I was a kid, I remember asking my mother if I could live forever if I drank more milk. So, and I always had a certain fascination and faith in technology, even as a kid. So that was always on my mind. And then I remember being 19 and deciding I wanted to be cremated instead of buried because I didn't like the idea of being buried. And then somewhere between then and my mid to late 20s, I heard of Cryonics. Probably somebody making a joke about it or something, or just some casual. And for some reason, it kind of started sinking into me that that's a good idea. No internet or anything back in those days. So I remember I was watching the Tomorrow program with Tom Snyder, if anybody remembers that. He had a lot of unusual guests on. I think it was NBC or something. And Robert Ettinger was a guest. The godfather of Cryonics. And I saw him on there. I'd seen one previous television thing where a young woman had suspended her father. And there was another thing I saw where somebody ran out to the 7-Eleven or whatever and got a bunch of ice for his girlfriend or something. So those were on the top of my mind right about the time I saw Ettinger on Tom Snyder. So I immediately called up the network and asked if I could find out who that person was. And they sent me, I still have the little blue postcard they sent me with Robert Ettinger's phone number on it. So I immediately called him up. So that got me interested and involved. And I started, donating a few bucks to him and keeping in touch a little bit. I didn't end up going to a actual meeting out in Michigan for another, I don't know, 6-7 years probably till I actually met somebody.
Where were you living at that time?
I was in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And I did try to start a group way back then, decades ago. And nothing materialized. I got some names mailed to me from Alcor and CI, I think. And contacted a couple of people and nothing ever happened. And I was much younger and I wasn't that worried about it. So I got to the point where I started visiting and thought, well, maybe I'll need to live near CI or Alcor, and that'll be so I, just to scope it out, I visited both places, ended up living in a couple of houses owned by Cryonics down in Arizona, right blocks from Alcor.
And 2 blocks from where I am, in fact.
Yeah. Exactly. It's kind of funny that we're so close together. But anyway, so I started to come down here first time maybe for a week, couple days or whatever it was, and then gradually a month and stayed in hotels a little bit, and then found out there's places I could stay. And gradually, now I spend most of my time down here. But what happened was I I figured I didn't want to try to start a group in Minneapolis because I was going to eventually live in one of these, Michigan or Arizona. And my sister, out of the blue, after decades of never discussing it, whether never trying to convince her, decided she wanted to be suspended too. So I figured, well, she's never going to move out of Minneapolis, so I'll try to start a group. So that's the long story. I got names from Alcor and CI members, and I sent those two groups emails, and they passed on the email for me to their members in the area. And we had our first meeting on August of 2018. We took it from there.
Okay. Yeah, it always takes one person really to drive these things. It's like dropping something into a solution, having it crystallize around it. You need somebody to get it going. I certainly had that experience. True. So that was you in this case. Yeah. I'm surprised the people in Minneapolis didn't say we don't need cryonics. It's cold enough where it is as it is right now.
Oh yeah, we get lots of those jokes.
So tell us a little bit about Minnesota Cryonics Rapid Response.
Okay, like I said, we started on that day in August. We had like 11 people showed up. A couple of people from Wisconsin also. At first, we tried to cast a little wider net and get some Wisconsin people because they're just over the river from us. There's a high population. So we had our first meeting, and the usual things, trying to decide what to do. Can we get a funeral director? So our first mission was to get a funeral director. One of the guys in the group had an uncle who's a funeral director, so we met with him. I went to a friend's mother's memorial service and tried to talk to the funeral director there, made some cold calls, and ultimately called one up and said, can we come out and set up a whatever they call them, a pre-planning session. Didn't tell them about cryonics and showed up, and that's the one that's our main funeral director now. This happened like probably within the first few months of our meeting in August.
Yeah. So how many cases has your group been involved in at this time?
We've been involved in 3 that actually got suspended. We've done a surgery standby, and we've been peripherally involved with a couple out of state that we were just basically used as either backup, or we tried to help somebody find people in their area, funeral director or other cryonicists who might be able to volunteer and help out as a standby for a surgery, or in one case that's actually still ongoing, a standby and someone in hospice. But the 2 that we pretty much did on our own, and the first one was actually in conjunction with one of the major cryonics organizations, where we were they heard of us. We had some communication with them, and they contacted us, and they needed a funeral director. They had a plan with the funeral director, but it fell through at the last second, and so they called us, and we were able to respond quickly on that one. So basically 3 so far.
So that's actually quite a large number for such a short time in a place which isn't usually thought of as a center for cryonics.
Right, and 3 of our key members too. It was quite a unfortunate coincidence. Yeah.
The 3 of your members were the ones being cryopreserved.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you shrank in size fairly quickly, though, but at least you took care of each other.
Like I say, and they were our primary movers too, coincidentally.
That's why I need more young people involved in this, because
exactly.
the activists are getting a little older.
Exactly, and we have young people. One of them moved to California, and another one is possibly going to move to Arizona. So we're losing them fast, but they're still, even the guy in California is still, working with us as if he were still in the group. I'm in Arizona all the time, so most of the time. So it's been a kind of a remote thing in a sense now anyway. But since COVID with Zoom, we've only had 1 or 2 meetings in person anyway. So
What kind of setup do you have? Like, what kinds of equipment do you have on hand? And where do you get that from?
we're very very minimal. It's very frustrating. We've gotten sodium citrate and heparin from one of the Cryonics organizations. That's been our source to date. Um, we got we purchased a Lucas One ourselves, which we used in the last suspension. We didn't have for the first one or two.
Is that one where you have to hook it up to air or oxygen to power it? Is it
Yeah,
the old model? Yeah, okay.
actually, we had it for a couple of years now. I was threatening to sell it because we weren't doing anything with it. And a new member jumped on it with his son and got the air tanks and got it working. And the next day he had a major stroke and died, and it was used on him.
Oh, wow.
So that was quite the irony.
Amazing timing. Yeah.
But
I
and
think
we
there's some
had,
advantages to those old ones. Actually, we kind of look down on Lucas One as the old one, but there's some advantages because we've been a lot of problems with the batteries in the later models.
right,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
we've got people in our group that have said that exact thing to me, and they didn't want to get it in the water, and the electrical, the other one. So anyway, I don't understand all the stuff like that. I kind of delegate pretty much that. But and we got 3 packets or bags for 3 of our people. We've gotten syringes and things like that to try to administer the medications ourselves. We never have administered it ourselves. We got a intensive care unit they volunteered to inject for us,
That's good.
which was we've been very lucky. Had a lot of really good luck. Another situation, we have a paramedic. We did a little program trying to put together some paramedics, and we ended up with one pretty good one. We were able to call in at the last second on our first independent case, and he was able to come in and administer a difficult situation during COVID with his hazmat suit and the whole thing. So
Was that just the initial medications? Did he help with any later stages?
no, we're limited fund wise to the point of not having any money. So to call him in, we called him in on a Sunday. He stopped cooking. He turned the oven off. He was cooking dinner for his lunch for his family, whatever. He ran down, got down there in 20 minutes, and 20 minutes before our patient passed away, he was declared. He taught one of our volunteers who had some experience with syringes, but this guy, our patient was 88, and it was a difficult insertion. So our guy came down and taught our volunteer how to do it, and then the paramedic left, and our volunteer was able to do it successfully after that.
That's good. Yeah, that can be tough on someone with old blood vessels. That can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you get the Lucas from? Did you get that yourself, like from eBay, or did one of the organizations find that for you?
Got it from eBay. There's a place called, I think it's Coast Biomedical or something like that. In I forget what state it's in. It might be Ohio, but I can't remember. But there's one on eBay, and I tried to bid low or whatever, and I waited too long. I ended up paying more than we wanted to, but a cheap deal in retrospect.
Do you want to share what the cost is for people who are thinking about doing this themselves?
Yeah, it was like $4,200, 4,200, something like that. And we had
seems a fair bit for a Lucas One, but if it's in good working order, though, that's still not bad.
Yeah, and like I say, we had to get a compressed air tank for it, and maybe another piece I can't remember to get it functioning. I've heard of somebody else getting a hold of a few of them for much cheaper, but that wasn't our option at the time. So
Mhm. Are you planning on adding more equipment in the future?
um,
Or does it depend on the skills of the people there as to whether they can
oh
actually
yeah, it
make use of
depends on
it?
all the usual factors, the skills of the people, finances. I'd like to incorporate more medications and more expertise in that area. I've been trying to do that for quite some time. Um, Other equipment, we'd have, I mean, one of our suspensions, she wanted to get an ECMO somehow. Uh, that was her deal.
That'll be expensive. Yeah, you'll need probably 4
Yeah, she
people and,
thought we needed a
you
hundred
know,
thousand dollars to do anything,
yeah.
but we're just doing it on a shoestring. And like I say, we've been very lucky with what we have put in place. We've been able to, do the basic anticoagulants, but that's about it. And the chest compressions.
Well, it makes a big difference if the team from the major organization is some distance away. It makes a big difference to get that started quickly, and also the initial cooling is extremely important.
Yeah,
So it's very much worth doing.
yeah, it's critical. You find it out when you're quite a ways from the other places to for them to respond even in the optimal time. You're just gonna have too many situations where your local is gonna be critical.
Yeah. Well, talking of that, what are the greatest difficulties you've faced while establishing the local SST organization?
Participation by members. Um, we've got people who are signed up and don't attend meetings regularly or participate in our activities. Some people look at our meeting notes, and some people, we've got all kinds of different levels of participation to, they've been to one meeting and we never saw them again, to we know they're signed up, but they don't come to meetings. But when we contact them, they're just busy or whatever. And even our members, there's a limited amount. I have a limited amount of energy and time because, like somebody once said to me, you got to live the life you know you have.
Yeah.
So it's just so time consuming. There's so many factors involved. You know, I think maintaining and nurturing relationships and establishing relationships with funeral directors, it's really critical
Mhm.
because they've never done it before. And I actually, when I am in Minnesota, I actually stay near our funeral home, so I actually drop in and talk to them once in a while. You got to pick your spots because they're very busy. You don't want to bug them too much. And we've tried to get backup funeral directors, and we've had, you know, a little bit of success, but you never know who's going to come through for you unless they've come through for you before. In our
Yeah.
particular funeral home they've come through all 3 times for us.
That's
And you
good,
got
yeah,
to,
because that is a very important element, and it's easy to find people who say, "Oh yeah, we'll do the job," and then they really don't know what they're doing and
oh
not really
yeah,
willing
and you have
to
to
do it.
push them to some extent without, pushing them too hard. So there's a lot of tact involved in it. Same with the paramedics. They most of the paramedics are looking for full time jobs, and so you have to, in my judgment, you have to reinforce them or reward them quite significantly financially to keep them interested. We've had a number of them. We had a pizza lunch, and we went to the recruiting site Indeed and we got tons of great resumes and interested people. Just a really impressive resumes. Our current guy is a flight medic and administrator and got all kinds of experience in all kinds of areas.
Mm.
And but he kind of rose to the top. We tried other ones. We paid him X number of dollars, and they would come to a training and leave halfway through, or
Mm.
wouldn't show up at the last minute, or weren't interested anymore because it wasn't a full time job, ongoing income, and there's just so many different every factor in cryonics I've found that looking for difficulty is everything kind of branches out into a bunch more problems, things to solve and to keep on the right track and that type of thing. So I guess the biggest problem is participation. Although
Mm.
we've had great participation, and like I call some of our people actual heroes because of what they've done when they actually go to the standby and do what they've done. So, but still, we'd love more participation with the members we have, and it's also hard to get new members. We had a meetup site. We got like maybe another additional 20, 25 people interested in cryonics supposedly. But then when you try to get them to come to meetings or anything like that, or even communicate with you, it's just falls flat. So
Yeah, it's an old story. There's
that's a
always people
constant
who like to
struggle.
talk or say they're interested, but when it comes to actually doing
Yeah.
anything, even getting together to talk, you lose a lot of them.
From your standpoint, Max, you aren't going to hear anything you haven't heard before a million times and experienced yourself. But I guess this is for other people that are considering starting something up.
Yeah. So what you said, some people there have really stepped up. So are there any particular notable victories or outcomes from SST that you're especially pleased with,
Well,
given that you only done three so far?
all three of them actually, although they could have gone better, every one could have gone better. But the first one ended up being a straight freeze, but there were a lot of problems involved in that. But that actually turned out to be lucky too, because it could have been a non-suspension at all. That particular person had a contract that said if they weren't to the Cryonics organization, which within X number of hours, it was off. The $250,000 she had in an account wasn't going to go to Cryonics. But we were in communication with her power of attorney, who actually was an attorney, and he saw that we were able to jump on it and replace the funeral director that wasn't working out, and we were able to immediately get our people down there and pick her up, and we had set up a dry ice contact before any of this happened, and so we were able to, at the last minute one evening, call up, order the dry ice, have it delivered to the funeral home, and get it paid for before the person that took the payment went home, just before they were going to go home. And we were able to get the order just before they were going to stop taking orders. And we got them to bust up the dry ice, and then the Cryonics organization was able to tell the funeral directors how to apply it. And then we picked up the representative of the Cryonics organization that night at the airport. And so we're proud of the problem solving along the way, because things are popping up to stop us. In the second suspension, we had a person was going between a rehab facility and a hospital. So we were trying to prepare both staffs for the eventuality that we'd want to come in and do something. Eventually ended up at a rehab place. They wouldn't put because they didn't have any medical staff, they wouldn't put any PIC lines or anything in there for medication. So we were able, like I say, that's the instance where our paramedic ran down there and was able to train somebody to do it. And the cooperation we got there again was lucky. Our guy was very charming, and he was awake for a week or two while he was in there, and he made friends with everybody in there and told them about his cryonics wishes. And they're lined up watching from the doorways, watching the procedure, and they got us ice from the facility, from all corners of the facility, and they actually traded off in doing chest compressions for us.
That's really good.
So again, everything kind of fell into place. Our third one, we had this massive stroke, which was a bad situation. So there was a big question whether it would be a straight freezer or we're going to take a shot at perfusion. We ended up consulting a whole bunch of people in Cryonics, actually, and called one or two people, and then they called people, and we finally came to a consensus. Let's take a crack at it. And the ICU staff was fantastic. They hid our Lucas equipment under the sheets and stuff under our patient so that it wouldn't upset the family. And so we're at declaration of death, we were immediately able to get in there and get things going. And like I say, they volunteered to administer the medications, and then they actually ran down to the pharmacy and picked up Maalox down there, and that was the first time we tried Maalox. So we got that in too. So again, we got a lot of bad. I got a lot of good luck and a lot of great people. And our fear is, you might end up with the administrator like told one of our people, "You'll never get a bag of ice in here."
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
again, it's juggling all these problems, and I think we've done a pretty good job with that. But we've had luck on our side too.
The managers and the risk management people can be a problem sometimes because it's their job to say
Yeah,
no to people doing anything different.
right. We've also been very lucky to have family back us up and be on board and be prepped. They're all for us, so that's very much easier to deal with the hospital's administrators when the family's there backing you up.
Mm, very much so, yeah. So you didn't have a situation where, because you said they had to sort of hide the Lucas from the family, but you didn't really have a problem with the family wanting to hang around when you need to start the procedure and
No,
being
no,
difficult.
that was just for psychological reasons that they put it under there, the breastplate or whatever that hard board is underneath, and they just didn't want to, upset the family. All the family was
Mm.
totally aware of everything that was going on. Um,
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's having three supportive families in a row. Yeah, don't bet on that being the case for the next next one because that's probably
no,
fairly unusual if you get that much support.
that's one of the many things that makes me nervous.
Hmm.
Our mantra was always at the beginning, what are we going to do if we have an emergency tomorrow or today? People wanted to talk about the future more, which is fantastic, or that we needed $100,000 to do anything. And we just said, what can we possibly do to piece things together in case something happens tomorrow? And we didn't
Hmm.
get our first case for almost 3 years. And then we got another one within 3 months, then another one within 6 months. Now it's been
Hmm.
like a year and a half since the last one.
And one of the troubles with that is not having a lot of cases, of course, is you don't get a lot of chance to do training. You kind of forget the skills. So it's good to have training sessions every so often.
Yeah, we got our ultimate training session in the real world. We had a Zoom meeting. Aaron Drake came out and or he didn't come out. He did a Zoom for us at one point, which was basically an introduction to cryonics for some paramedics and some basic talk about what to do in a suspension situation or a standby situation. And then Dennis Kowalski came out um, with all his equipment, and we had a day long training with that. Those two things happened before we ever had an actual case. And then subsequently, we had 3 cases, and then Ashwin DeWolf came out with a whole big group from Florida and New York, and we had another uh, day training, but that was after our 3 suspensions. So we did
And
have
how many people came to the training?
the one that Ashwin had. We had 34 total,
34.
but
Wow.
that was a lot of people from that group. A lot of trainers came out, and I'm counting our 3 funeral directors that were there, all from the same funeral home. And we had people from 6 different states, just had expressed interest somehow along the way, which also bodes well for starting remote groups. I know there are people out there, I've been in communication with them. They hear about us and contact us sometimes, but there might be 2 or 3 people in their interest in their group. And I think that just with a little bit of effort, like this registry thing you guys are up to is a fantastic idea, because I think there are more people out there than you think. Again, you're going to run into the same problem. You're going to find a handful, and then only a couple are interested in really following through. But there are some really dedicated people out there. I think, for like you mentioned, at first you need one person to kind of push it. I think there's a lot of seeds
Mm.
out there, even in areas that aren't heavily populated with cryonicists, which I think they're overlooked. Like we're considered flyover country in Minneapolis, but and we've been able to branch out. Like I got a call from a guy in Ohio one time. He was going to undergo a number of cranial surgeries, and he wanted backup. So I worked a long time with him on the phone and emails, and then got him a couple of funeral directors, one of which looked like it was going to be fantastic. He was going to go out and to the operations site and monitor it and talk to the administrators and get the equipment. And he was very, very interested in really diving into it. And the young fella basically dropped off to mapping and you didn't contact us anymore. It's a longer story, but anyway, so in the process, we got a hold of some people in Ohio that maybe would help us out. Again, there's people all over, and I think a lot of them too never got involved until something happened. Like when we had our first patient go down, that's when one of our main members now that's contributed, one of the better contributors it was like a wake up call for him, and he wasn't coming to meetings. He came to the first one, and it just lit a fire in him. And because he got to know this person, from the first couple of meetings, and that was enough. And so, in other ones, again, another person had tried to be in a group years earlier, and he was kind of in ours, and he didn't show much interest. But when he saw us suspend a couple people, then he became a more regular member. So I think if you can get that activation energy going, that one or two people to get something going and show that you're making some progress. It doesn't have to be an actual suspension, I don't think, but they can see you're serious. Because I think some people have had the experience of being in groups or hearing about groups and then they fall apart. Because I think that is the history of a lot of them.
Yeah. I think with the registry, one thing we hope is you're a good. That's why I have you on the podcast. Of course, you're a good example of what can be done, and we're trying to inspire other people. I hope the Cryo Registry will do a couple of things that should help people in an area meet other people to help form kind of a nucleus there. Whereas they may not do that because cryonics organizations generally don't do much reaching out to specific areas and building local groups. There hasn't been a whole lot of that. But beyond that, I would hope that different groups in different areas can maybe get online, like on a Zoom call every so often, every 3 months or whatever, and just talk about their experiences and share experiences and learn from one another and give each other some encouragement. So groups like yours, which actually have cases, can talk about that. Other people, of course, are going to wait a long time before they have the first case. And as you were just saying, it's really, when it's real, it makes a big difference. Just talking about it theoretically is one thing. When you have an actual case and someone's life is on the line, that's a whole other thing. So I think sharing those experiences could be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. In my experience too is I don't know if you're aware of a fellow named Diego and Remy. They're from Mexico. Do you know those guys?
Yes, yeah, I met Diego.
Yeah, they started a little bit trying to stir up some action locally and all around in that sense. So they're good, and like I say, I run into a couple of guys in Tennessee that looked like they were really gung ho, and so the people are out there, and the more you do, or the more people hear about you, you start hearing about all these people, and they do get excited by the prospects because they don't feel like they're alone. So I think your idea is a great one.
So what do you think? What kind of advice would you give to people who's interested in starting their own local SST group or getting more involved in an existing local group?
If they're just starting one, my advice would be to do exactly what we did. If you're an Alcor member, ask Alcor to help you, get some contacts. And if you're a CI member, to have CI try to help you get some contacts. And try to get
both organizations, even if you're not a member of one, still ask them because it's to their benefit as well.
Yes.
At least if the organization's willing to work with you. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I'm a member of both, so that's I didn't have to consider that, but both Alcar and CI. But I guess my first thought would be you got to have the funeral director is kind of the most important to me. Again, because you can always run out and put ice cubes on somebody. We had one guy, in fact, our second suspension, he said, just put ice on me and get me to Billman Hunt. That's the name of our funeral director in Minneapolis. And he got more. He ended up getting sodium citrate and heparin, and we got him at declaration. We were able to start immediately on him. So, and the feedback from the Cryonics organization was very positive. So I guess my first, I think of it as building blocks. My first thing would be to build in a funeral director, get out there and talk to some, and you're going to get turned down. I thought I had a great backup. He was going to on his own anyway. He was going to try to organize funeral directors around the state and send in some kind of a network. And he worked in what they call the trade. They call it the trade, where they just go out and pick up bodies. They don't actually do all the funeral work. They might rent a funeral space to work on somebody. But anyway, I thought he was going to be great. And then I made the mistake of calling him up during a embalming, and he got quite angry with me. So that was kind of the end of that relationship. So, and then, like I say, some people say they'll help you and then they don't return your phone calls or your emails. They're very positive and then they don't. But my advice is to specifically go out and go eyeball to eyeball with them and bring up Cryonics after the first 30 seconds or a minute, and I gave him $100, $100 bill, and to show we mean business. I mean, it sounds kind of trite and corny, but I call it Dennis Kowalski's Dollars and Donuts program, because that's how he got his funeral director. And he brings him donuts every once in a while and gives him $50. So I upped it to 100, and it's just critical. And you find out the personalities. These guys had a sense of humor. They were fun. They wanted to do something new and different. And then they came through for us all 3 times. And there were some difficulties and hard things to deal with. But when you had got that relationship, they offered us their conference room to meet in.
That's good.
We held a couple of in-services there. So we called them off the golf course on Memorial Day to pick up for us. They've passed up cases for us of their own on picking them up. And they're used to running an easy business where they just run out and pick up bodies and they process them at their leisure. And we've got to press on them to get early flights and do this and do that and keep a Ziegler on hand and insulate it properly and have the stuff there and not use it for somebody else and then not have it there. And I mean, it's just, like I say, every problem has a million problems behind it. But again, to get back, make my long answer longer, to go back to your original question, funeral director, I think that it's the key thing, because you can work with them remotely. Like a Cryonics organization can call them up and tell them what to do, and they'll at least put ice on somebody and get them quickly and ship them quickly and follow directions.
Yeah,
So
not
that
to ship them too quickly. I would urge a little caution there, because funeral directors, in my experience, again, well, let's say they will do certain things, but if it's a matter of building a shipping container, you really don't want to let them do that without direct supervision, because
no,
we've had experiences where they say they'll do certain things. We've even asked them to send photos or video before they do the shipping, and they do it without doing that, even though they promise. So you really need to have someone there who's been trained and knows what they're doing to have eyes on the situation.
I couldn't agree more, and we did just that. But I'm talking about if there's really a crazy situation where you've got no control and you're just grasping at straws, to have that funeral director is better than nothing by far. But yeah, we definitely we told them exactly how to do the installation. We provided it for them. We were there when they did it, and we got good grades on the other end by the Cryonics organizations for the packing.
And apart from the dollars and donuts at the beginning, it's nice to send a thank you card or to helpful nurses or medical personnel too, to thank them. It gives a good reputation, I think, to the Cryonics people.
Yep, it's been done. We've sent candy and flowers and to that ICU unit that helped us out, and in nice letters and things like that. And we give the funeral director significant bonuses for things, surprise bonuses, and the paramedics too. Give them money that they're surprised they're getting, which people in my group don't like. You set expectations and you spend more than you have to, they think. But my philosophy is we want them to help us again, and we want any problems they had or frustrations, or they think that this isn't worth it, which they've got plenty of opportunities to think that way. I want them to be reinforced, and I hate to say it, somewhat obligated. You develop a relationship and you reward them well, and they're more committed. One of our funeral directors, one of them said, they consider themselves to be part of the Cryonics family. So when you hear things like
That's
that,
good.
you feel like you're doing things correctly.
Yeah. Have you had any conversations with coroners or medical examiners in the area to,
Yeah,
in case you get an autopsy situation coming up?
yeah, that's a hard situation for me. A point of frustration. Um, I initially, when I heard about medical examiners and their power, I'm very concerned about that getting in the way. Um, we actually went to a coroner open house in the first months of our group. I thought, well, let's go out and get face to face with one. So we went out to a open house, and it was a tour, and there were two people going to guide the tour, and one of them was an actual coroner that was working at night as a volunteer, or whatever. So I made sure I got in that coroner's group, and at the end of it, I asked her if we could meet with her and talk about cryonics and stuff, and she was open to it and everything. And then we were about to set up a meeting is when COVID hit, and then they wouldn't meet us. So I kind of I didn't follow up on it for a number of reasons, but yeah, we're very concerned about that. Like I say, one of our guys was 88, and so that wasn't a problem. I still worry about older people, even younger people. In fact, the case that we've been partially monitoring with another organization, the person is very young. So the idea of, although they're in a hospice situation, which helps things out, as you know, we still were concerned. Like if somebody brought up the fact to me that if she had a fall during this process or whatever, that might be a factor that they'd want to look at also. So yeah, it's been very frustrating for me to get the right information. And I've heard that organizations have a relationship with local coroners and medical examiners, and that they try to get moved up on the list. But I've also heard of that being a problem anyway. Of course, I've talked to the funeral directors about it. They actually offered the opportunity of me to go with them to the medical examiner to pick up some remains. So it's been discussed with everybody, and hopefully that's another thing I didn't go into hard enough and far enough. Again, there's a million things, but I would like to go visit the coroner with our funeral directors. It's an inroad into the coroners in the area.
Hmm.
And in Minnesota, I looked into it. There's like a couple of main offices that cover like 80-90% of the state. So if you get in good with a couple of them and they don't move on or whatever, I think be a very good relationship to have. Again, my experience has been when I ask people about the coroner and medical examiner interference, they say, "Oh, we've never had a problem with it." But we had a problem with it on our first case because I didn't mention in the first case, the hang up with the first funeral directors, they wouldn't put ice on the body remotely because a medical examiner hadn't signed off on it yet. And they were right not to do it. I don't know how our people got the body, but we sent our people down there, and I didn't get all the details because it wasn't our case. But somehow we were able to go down there, and our people were able to get the body.
It certainly helps to establish that relationship. It makes it a little harder for them to say no if you make a reasonable request. And
Yeah.
I have actually found that they often are quite willing to cooperate. I mean, they have all the power; they can say no very easily. But we've had cases where we've asked them. We actually had a local case in Scottsdale, and we went down there and talked to them, and they wouldn't guarantee anything, but they ended up not only not doing an autopsy, but they didn't even do a CT scan. They just did a external examination, then released the person. So, and there's been other cases where we've had virtual autopsies where they just do a CT scan and toxicology panel rather than digging out someone's brain and chopping it to pieces. So that's certainly helpful. So I would recommend that people do not sort of give up in the face of the power of the medical examiner, because sometimes they'll be reasonable and cooperate, and that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's been. I used to say I had three concerns. I don't know if I remember them exactly. I know one of the three. My concerns was alert systems for people, a medical examiner, and funding. There's something else there too, but yeah, that's always been a main concern of mine. But I'm guilty of trying hard to figure that angle out and running into resistance and people saying it's no problem and this and that. And I say, well, it's a problem. And fight back a little bit, but then, on to something else or whatever. Like I say, I've got a list of things I'd like to get into more. I'd like to delegate to people and say, do this and have it done by this time. But, these are volunteers we're working with, and they've all got lives, and it's hard to, push people too hard.
Do you have any thoughts on what are the biggest mistakes cryonicists make when it comes to standby stabilization and transport?
That's a tough one. I mean, the obvious things, if you don't have you've got nobody to call to help, if you don't have any members that have said they're going to be able to do this or that, you don't have any equipment at all, you don't have a funeral director, I guess. Beyond that, the problems are, we've been pretty lucky. Availability of people, I guess, is one problem. On this recent case that we've been peripherally involved in, as I mentioned, call up our ex-nurse member who'd been involved in one of our suspensions. He was in Tasmania, Australia, so he wasn't available. Another guy didn't have his car and couldn't call Uber because he didn't have a credit card for some reason, stolen or whatever. And then called somebody else, and they had a critical career interview right then. I'm in Arizona. Another guy that would have helped us in so I guess that's the biggest problem, is availability. But as far as other problems, we just kind of solved just by lots of phone calls during the suspension to, if we don't have this or we don't have that, how do we get it, and who knows, and if it's information we need, keeping in touch with the Cryonics organization for advice. And so I don't know if you got any specific thoughts on where you're going with that question, but because
No, it's pretty open-ended.
Okay.
Yeah, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but local groups stand or fail really depending on the work of one person usually. So how do you ensure long-term continuity of local groups?
That's a big problem. Our first suspension, she would always say to me, Chuck, if one of us dies, this group will fold in 6 months. And I use that as partial motivation to keep going, because she died in the first 3 years. But that's a tough question, because our younger people, they're living their lives and they're working on their careers and their businesses or whatever they're in. And we don't have a lot of them. And some of them will come and be interested, and they just don't come to more meetings. And like I say, a couple of them are moving. One's in California, one's going to go to Arizona. So, I mean, that's actually one of the subjects I'll probably bring up at the next meeting. I mean, I brought it up all along, and we're all well aware that we're very thin. But I could bolster it with, we'd like leadership going forward, but I'd like to bolster it with paramedics, get more paramedics, but that'd take a little money to keep them interested. But because that would always be your backbone and your basis in the city, and they all know each other, or a lot of them know each other. So we've used one to help recruit others, try to recruit others, and nothing ever came to the point where we could pay more. But so I look at that as a partial backup, have paramedics.
And that helps also in taking some of the strain off volunteers who are maybe afraid of actually trying to do this work because they're not really trained necessarily to draw up medications and so on. So having a paramedic helps.
All those factors are involved. We have people that just don't like, to be honest, dealing with dead bodies. It's you might say, oh, a cryonicist, I shouldn't worry about that. But, we're all human. We all have our psychological foibles or whatever. But I'd love to get more young people in. We just stopped our meetup because they doubled the cost of that. We got a couple members through there, but the younger people, I mean, when I was younger, I was the same way. I was very interested in cryonics, but I just didn't push to do too much myself.
Yeah, it doesn't seem quite real.
And I'm actually amazed at some of the younger ones that are real gung ho.
Yeah.
for that reason.
One other question, and I don't know if I've thought about this a lot, but I was asked to ask this question. There are currently two seemingly opposing approaches to doing standby stabilization in the field. On the one hand, is building independent SST capabilities for all organizations. So, local groups like yours that are willing to work with Alcor or CI, whatever organization. And then there's building Cryonics provider exclusive capabilities. Do you have any thoughts on, which is better or what the balance should be or whether one needs more encouragement?
Sorry, would you be referring specifically to what we call field cryo?
Sorry,
Are you talking about field cryo?
Yeah, the SST part. So field cryo. So, on one model, you've got the organization tightly controlling everything, doesn't really want to work with local groups. On the other hand, you've got groups like yours who are willing to develop some capabilities and at least do initial procedures and work with whatever organization.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure all the reasoning behind not helping local groups, but we had a little tagline once, supporting cryonics in Minnesota is supporting cryonics everywhere. That's my philosophy. I think it's somewhat, it's obviously difficult, but it's somewhat easy in one respect too to help the local groups. I mean, you could, with a little bit of extra money, you could train up some funeral directors to do field cryo and washouts or whatever. Some of the more sophisticated organizations would say, "Oh, you can't do it. You're going to mess the person up worse than you're going to help them," and that type of thing. But I'm a firm believer in give everybody who wants help somehow, and I think training up local groups it's critical. You just can't get to people fast enough in too many cases. I mean, it's as simple as that. You just can't do it. You can think you're going to do it and you're going to get there with your super group or whatever and do everything right and bingo bango, and it just, I don't know, that's not reality to me.
Yeah, if a local group can get the initial cooling down, preferably with a few medications in, that can make a big difference when the organization is, a number of hours away.
You want somebody to say, I'll be there, and I'll be there really fast in 7 or 8 hours, or do you want somebody sitting there by the bed because they're available and they're in town and they know the person from the group. They're gonna be there. We had people sitting around people for days, and to the point that they were
3
taking
weeks is the longest standby I've seen.
What's that?
3 weeks is the longest standby I've seen.
Wow, that's a long one.
Yeah. Well, just to finish up, are there any, may have already covered this, but any changes you'd like to see in the field?
More support of local groups. That's number one. Because with very little money or relatively little effort, you can make a huge difference. That's my biggest point. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. It's just.
Well, we'll try to get the Cryonics organizations to do more of that. But at our group at Biostasis Technologies and RBS and related groups, we'll be pushing with that. Obviously, like with the cryo registry, hopefully we can make a difference in getting people in contact and giving them encouragement. As you say, I think it is really important for early response.
Yeah, a little training, a little encouragement, a little support. It goes a long way. Like I say, just one of the organizations just helping us getting us heparin and sodium citrate. Such a simple thing. Okay, I'll mail it out to you free. Yeah. The supply line has changed and now we're going to have to pay for it. But I mean, that's the kind of simple, or calling around for us, because we've got some people that are relatively remote in Minnesota. We have a member 2.5 hours north of the Twin Cities and a couple hours south. And we've actually had one of the organizations contact funeral directors up in the area for us from a cryonics point of view, and we lined up no hard relationships, but a couple of people that were willing to help out. Whereas when our member called, he got no response. Nobody would help him, and one wanted $25,000 for it.
Wow.
The funeral director, just to put ice on somebody. But then when the actual cryonics person called up, somehow they took it more seriously. They didn't think it was just some person off the street asking about freezing dead people. It was an actual organization, and they actually said they would be willing to do this and that for X number of dollars and that type of thing. So
Yeah, and it's much easier for the organization to get things like heparin and send that than for individuals. It's not something you can just go around to the 7-Eleven and pick up. So it
no,
certainly helps if they're cooperative like that.
yeah. So any kind of line, when we talk about getting more medications or something that's not restricted or something that might be easy to get that they could send us, anything like I think it would be easier than they think to help us. Again, the mantra used to be, you don't have enough people in your area. We got to go to San Francisco first or Chicago first or whatever. But we're a little bit closer to Chicago. If we got some paramedics and some volunteers that were willing to travel, which I think some of them might be. We even had one of our funeral directors actually expressed interest in working for Cryonics and being, a travel person or to work in that capacity somehow. So I think the more you stop worrying about all the barriers to doing something for local groups and find out how easy it is and how you mentioned earlier how they all might interconnect and support each other in cryonics in general. It's we're a small group. We have to pull together, and we can't leave anybody out in the woods because it's too easy to help them. Even a little bit of help could be critical.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty good point to close on, and an encouraging point. And I hope people will follow up. And as we get the Cryo Registry going and get that moving, hopefully you'll be available to talk if we do a Zoom call with the people who are interested in this, and people can learn from each other. So yes, you can do things. And as you get older, like you and I, you really need to start doing things and encourage the younger people to get involved. So thank you very much, Chuck, for your efforts and for coming on here and telling us about them.
I appreciate the opportunity, Max. Thank you very much.